Hello everyone, ThunderEgg here. So in today's video, I want to predict the playstyles of the rest 4 of the 7 Archons using the elemental resonance and also the basic idea that each element represents in Genshin. Now, this is sort of a continuation of my one of my older videos. Many of you probably have seen it. It's one of my best videos out there. It's predicting what the 7 Archons will look like based on mostly Honkai and other MiHoYo-based game characters. So this is sort of a continuation where I try to predict their playstyle based on what's the basically identity of each element into that. Now, of course, for a lot of them, I'll be offering two different variations because a lot of times elements can go in different directions that seem completely unrelated, but they're both related to the same element. So with that said, let's get started. Now, of course, we can start by recapping how much correspondence the elemental reaction resonance does have to do with the current existing 3 Archons. So we have the Anemo Archon, the Geo Archon, and the Electro Archon released already. For the Anemo Archon Venti, of course, he is probably the least related to the elemental resonance, since the Anemo elemental resonance focuses on stamina consumption decrease, movement speed increase, and skill cooldown decrease. But on the other hand, Venti focused on the other aspect of the Anemo element, which was crowd control. And Venti does a good job at it. It's up to this point, he is still the best character, purely speaking, in terms of crowd control abilities. So Venti didn't really go with the elemental resonance side of Anemo, but he went with the other major identity of Nemo, which is crowd control. Moving on to Zhongli. Zhongli is actually an interesting example. The elemental resonance is actually reworked around him during his buff in 1.3. Before his buff in 1.3, Zhongli mainly served as a shielder, and the old Geo resonance didn't have too much to do with him. The old Geo resonance was increased attack damage when shielded. That was about it. As for the new effect, it's basically worked to be in sync with Zhongli in the sense that both Zhongli and the double Geo resonance focuses on shielding, increasing shield strength, and also grants the character that is protected shield with more shred to decrease either to increase damage or decrease resistance. So basically, Zhongli is pretty much in sync with the Geo resonance. Moving on to the Electro one, I think Baal is quite good at representing the Electro resonance in the sense that the Electro resonance focuses on generating energy particles, and even though Baal is currently mainly served as a sub DPS and burst DPS for most people, but at the heart of her design kit, Baal's main purpose, or Baal's primary purpose, is to provide enough energy for the entire team. But of course, being one of the Archons, it's nice that she ended up having enough damage to serve as a sub DPS or a main DPS for most people. But again, at the core of her design, I think energy generation played a huge role. So of course, with that said, I'm going to try to predict the playstyles of the other 4 Archons using the rest of the rest of the resonances. Now, of course, Dendro doesn't have a resonance yet, but I believe by looking at some of the reactions that was spoiled by Dendro reactions, we can get a good view of that. But I do want to keep this video spoiler free for those of you that don't want to get spoiled. So I'll be talking about the Dendro last, and I'll make sure to give a spoiler warning so you can leave if you do not want to hear the Dendro part with the spoiled Dendro reactions. So starting with Hydro, which is going to be the next element that's coming apart from Dendro, which is in Sumeru. Hydro, my guess is, again, conclusions first. My guess is Hydro is either going to be a supporting person with the ability to heal, or a sub DPS, or a combination of the two. That's my guess of what the Hydro Archon is going to take on. and that comes from a combination between the Hydro Resonance and also on top what Hydro characters has been doing so far in game in general. So starting with the Hydro Resonance, the Hydro Resonance was probably seen as the most useless of the 6 resonance in game so far, because the Hydro Resonance offers is healing abilities. But for all the characters in game so far, for the 7 Hydro characters that are playable as of today, only 3 of them does any amount of healing, and on top of that, Xingqiu is not even a designated healer, so the only 2 designated Hydro healer are Barbara and Kokomi. So I don't think it's going to be, so that's one of the reasons why I don't think the Hydro Archon is going to be purely basing off the Hydro Resonance, because as we have seen with Kokomi, having a healer at this day and age in Genshin is not enough. The main purpose to make a character competitive in Genshin right now is the ability to fill in multiple roles with a single slot. So with her buff, with the clam set, and the fact that we're the Rift Hounds, Kokomi was able to get to a point where she can serve as a burst DPS during her ultimate window, and also at the same time having enough healing to serve as a healer, so that Kokomi could be fitted into other teams. But a more clear example is Barbara, who is purely as a healer. She is rarely seen in teams just because her healing is not enough. And if we look at any of the other meta healers in game right now, Bennett is mostly used for his ability healing and on top the damage buff. Jean is used mostly for healing and her ability to remove the elements that is affecting the active character, and Chi-Chi is not even used that much. So and Diona is used for shielding. So most of the healers in game do have to fill multiple roles, and I believe if they do end up deciding to give some healing abilities to the Hydro Archon, that she will be able to do some damage at the same time as well. The other reason I'm saying the damage part of the things is because if we look at all the characters in game, all the Hydro characters in game right now, all of them have some sort of support capability, whether it be that's their entire purpose, to someone like Yilin and Ayato, who has very minor support capabilities. So starting with Barbara, Barbara is a 40 healer, support is all she does. Ayato's Q is off field, so he is able to basically support another DPS while his Q is active. Mona's entire kit is based around buffing the active DPS damage, so more of a support. Kokomi is more of a support, or does have the support capabilities. Child supports mostly in the form of playing Vaporize or Electro Charge, where he is actually the enabler, not the DPS. Xingqiu, of course, the healing, the damage absorption are both support capabilities, and even Yilin has support capabilities of buffing damage of whoever is on the field, and of course also of Yilin's skills are off field, which technically counts as a support category. So with that said, I believe that the Hydro Archon will be not purely a support, but will have support capabilities, meanwhile being able to do damage. And if they really decide in, she might have a bit of healing capabilities, but I think she'll be overall a well-rounded unit that sort of can cover multiple roles at the same time, instead of being someone like zhongli that only focuses on shielding, or venti that only focuses on crowd control, or baal that only focuses on energy recharge. Although baal does have the damage part, so she's not only focusing on energy recharge, but I believe the Hydro Archon will be the well-rounded of the 4. Moving on to the Pyro Archon. The Pyro Archon, I believe, is 100% going to be a main DPS. Looking at all the in-game reactions right now regarding Pyro, I think the only one seeing screams is either attack or damage. The Pyro Resonances is the most useful one, and it's the only one that gives a flat damage increase. And on top, any of the Pyro DPS right now, even the Pyro supports, all pretty much focuses on either buffing damage or doing damage. So there's quite a bit of Pyro characters in game right now, but for almost all of them, taking apart Amber and Xinyan, who's not really meta at now. The rest, Bennett is a support that focuses on buffing damage. Healing is great for Bennett, but it's more like an extra thing to toss on. D-Luke focuses on damage. Hu Tao is the main DPS, focus on damage. Klee focuses on damage. Toma is the only Pyro shielder, but Toma isn't really used at the moment. Shanling focuses on damage and is also off-field damage. Yanfei is, again, DPS focuses on damage. And yoimiya focuses on damage. So as we can see, all the Pyro focuses is pretty much damage, and plus all the Pyro reactions is pretty much also the Cryo, together with Cryo, with Melt, Vaporize, Overload, and of course Swirl. They all pretty much focus on damage. So I think for the Pyro Archon, it's going to be very likely that she is going to be a main DPS. Now as for if they're going to throw in the damage buff side things for Bennett, into sort of the Pyro Archon, my guess is that they will toss in like a bit of it as maybe a passive skill or something, basically like something Yelan has that can sort of support the team when she doesn't need to be on the field. But I think her main focus will be on basically being a main DPS and doing high amounts of damage. Moving on to the Cryo Archon. The Cryo Archon is honestly the hardest one of them all in order to guess. It's not any easier than the Dendro Archon. The main reason being that for the Cryo Resonance, it's actually increasing the crit rate of against enemies of the active character that is able to use it when the effect is frozen. And of course, Frozen has been a pretty big part of the entire Cryo meta recently. I mean, compared to Permafreeze teams, Melt is never as popular. So this does offer one suggestion, which is that the Cryo Archon will provide some sort of crit rate increase, just like Rosaria does, but on a bigger scale. However, I don't think it will be much bigger than Rosaria's, because if it's any bigger than that, it's going to highly inflate the amount of damage that's doable in game, because it's basically equivalent of an artifact at that point. As for what other options the Cryo Archon is capable of, apart from increasing crit rate, which I think is going to be a huge deal, the other one that I could think of is by looking at some of the other Cryo characters' kits. The most popular one is of course Changyun's CD decrease for characters. It's very rare that the skill has the ability to decrease the cooldown of other skills, and the only other character apart from Changyun that has this is Raiden Shogun, and even for Raiden Shogun it's tied to a later constellation, whereas from Changyun it's given pretty early on as a constellation. So my guess is that Cryo is also able to, the Cryo Archon might also be able to have sort of a constellation like this that decreases the cooldown of all party members or herself or someone nearby, or the active character or something like that. So overall, I guess that the Cryo Archon is going to be a sub DPS. The main reason she's not going to be a main DPS is because, again, the only element that screams main DPS is Pyro, but that doesn't really stop her from being like a burst DPS like Baal, where she doesn't really go into her damage state in case it's Baal's Q, where she doesn't really enter that state normally until she unleashes an elemental skill or elemental burst. But she only has an X number of seconds in that state where she's able to do the damage. So that's my guess for the Cryo Archon. And that concludes my guess for the 3 Archons that are already revealed in game. So this is a spoiler warning for anyone that does not want to get spoiled on Dendro reactions. So assuming everyone staying here wants to listen to the Dendro reaction one. So for anyone that is staying, you probably know that Dendro does not react with 3 of the elements in game. It does not react with Geo, Anemo, or Cryo. And looking at the other 3 reactions available to Dendro, it can be clearly seen that Dendro is more of a support element, but in the sense that Dendro is able to apply debuffs to enemies that last a period of time, and is able to take advantage of that debuff by buffing itself sort of at the same time. And furthermore, Dendro is able to basically provide support by applying both debuffs and buffs sort of at the same time. So using the three reactions as example, for burning, the debuff it's applying is pyro damage over a period of time. The buff itself is providing is increased elemental reaction between pyro and Dendro in terms of damage increase. Dendro and the Electro, the debuff it's providing is, I believe, the both Dendro and the Electro damage percent will be increased for the active character, so the enemies will be able to have more damage dealt to them. And the buff it's providing is generating particles. And for the Hydro one, of course, the debuff it's providing is those spores that grows into mushrooms and that deals damage. And the buff it's providing is, I think also that, but it's also able to generate a bit of particles. They don't line up exactly, but I think overall, you get the big idea of how these work. So with that said, for the Dendro character, for the Dendro Archon, my guess is that the Dendro Archon will be a combination of these, in the sense that the Dendro Archon's kit will be a sub DPS with some support capabilities, because after all, Dendro is able to provide healing for a little bit. The Dendro Summitros are capable of healing team members just as the Hydro Summitros are capable of. So my guess is that the Dendro will be able to provide a bit of healing, but the healing will not be the main focus. The main focus will be providing debuffs onto enemies, meanwhile buffing their own team. And also, like the Dendro Summitros, the Dendro Archon might be able to have some sort of ability to generate some sort of Dendro construct that is able to deal damage if enemies walk onto it or something like that. So that's my guess for what the 7 Archons will do. I mean, 4 of the 7 Archons will do in terms of their playstyle. Please leave your comments down below on what you think the 7 Archons will be able to be played as. Of course, we're all looking forward to the Dendro Archon coming out in hopefully 3.1 or 3.0, or worst comes to worst 3.2. And of course, the rest of the Archons will probably have to wait about 1 year per Archon. But I think with the release of Sumeru, we'll get a much better idea what the Dendro resonance is, and also what the Dendro Archon will be mostly aimed towards as sort of a character design. So that's all I have for this video. If you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you and have a nice day.